Sutra Resource Law Sequence ***. Only what you give remains after you're gone. The world values us not for what we take but for what we give back to it. I'm repelled when people say, "You need to do this to make money," said Mark Zuckerberg, founder of the largest social network in the world. By early 2017, Facebook had 1.8 billion registered users, 716. A man at the helm of one of the most brilliant business projects in human history, one of the richest people on the planet, says that money isn't the most important thing in life. Even less so after death. Many truly great businesspeople understand this well. In 2010, Microsoft founder Bill Gates proposed to the billionaires of the world to donate half of their wealth to charity. Together with his wife, he founded a charitable foundation and, over 15 years, contributed more than $28 billion. Great wealth comes with great responsibility, obligations to share with society and ensure the best distribution of these funds to those who need them, explained Bill Gates. Gates was supported by billionaire philanthropist Warren Buffett. The 83-year-old Oracle of Omaha once said he would donate all his wealth to charity only after death, but in 2011, Buffett gave 75% of his fortune, about $37 billion, to several charitable organizations, the largest donation in the history of philanthropy. Mark Zuckerberg, incidentally, according to Forbes, was also among the top 5 most generous people in the world in 2012, 717. In modern management, there is the concept of a planning horizon. It varies, some plan for 1 or 2 days, others for 1 or 2 years. The planning horizon influences the level of decision making. For example, those who build strategic businesses don't think in the format of today. Their task is to look 50-100 years ahead. People like Steve Jobs thought this way, or Elon Musk today, and all those who, in essence, shape the development of civilization. Thus, it turns out that the thinking horizon, the planning horizon, and the scale of a person's goals determine the magnitude of their contribution to humanity's development. And a person's worth is not measured by how much they consume or control but by the value of the work they take responsibility for and what remains after them when they're gone. This rule applies to many other aspects of life. For example, what is the value of a conversation? It's the amount of time that conversation will remain relevant. For instance, when girls gossip about a friend who wore too short a dress, what's the value of that conversation? The girl will change, and there will be nothing more to talk about. But the dialogues of Socrates, which are 2,500 years old, remain part of our cultural heritage, still read and studied today. The value of Socrates' dialogues is 2,500 years. As Cervantes said, a man should be judged by his deeds. 718. What remains of you is what you gave. This law is well known to artists. The legacy of great artists enriches the treasury of the world's spirit in its absolute development and ultimate goal. The famous saying by Shota Rustaveli in the poem The Night in the Panther's Skin states, "What you hide is lost, what you give is yours." 719. This formula is most accurate for a person who adheres to spiritual laws. The beloved wife of the founder of Islam, Aisha, also known as the mother of the believers, recounted that once they slaughtered a sheep and gave all the meat to the needy except for the shoulder. The Prophet Muhammad said, "All that remains is everything but the shoulder." By saying this, he wanted to explain to his followers that what is spent on godly purposes is the true wealth that stays with a person and benefits them, while what is kept for oneself is lost forever. 720. In 1500, leading Moscow icon painter Dionysius was invited to northern Russia to paint the walls of the Feropontov monastery. The frescoes and the main iconostasis of the Church of the Nativity of the Virgin have survived to this day. But the most important thing about this story is that Dionysius undertook all the work for free, with the only payment being the salvation of his soul through the prayers of the monastery's monks. For the salvation of the soul, this astounding feat, an example of masterful late-life frescoes in the Byzantine style, was accomplished 721. The masterpiece gifted by the artist to the people has naturally survived the catastrophic times of persecution and war and still lives on. The reward for a good deed lies in its very accomplishment. This, it seems, was formulated by Ralph Emerson. However, it's not only about the accomplishment. It's true that we can expect a return, but in a different way than what initially seemed obvious. For instance, by giving money, we might be rewarded with other blessings, emotions, or at another energetic level. This was well described by Nilton Bonder in The Kabbalah of Money 722. Rabbis, drawing from the theory of reincarnation reflected in Jewish traditions, explain that everything comes full circle and everything returns according to the law of retribution. Justice returns from another dimension of time and reality. Everything in the universe is cyclical, everything returns, although the cycle's length is often so vast that for those living on Earth, it seems like a straight line. Ultimate generosity is not only in taking nothing but in giving your own, and not just giving, but with great effort, even in scarcity. John Chrysostom. This scheme, according to Bonder, helps us understand how often we are prisoners of our prejudices, gravitating toward noticing only the receiving cycles, which have a very short return radius. In the functional world, Atsalut, we use logic and are primarily concerned with minimizing costs and maximizing profits in the shortest possible time. In the emotional world, Yetzirah, we possess an internal treasure or our potential, which provides for our needs. This dimension reflects the time and opportunities to create means for living and encompasses all our emotions. In this case, the cycle's radius is larger but still comprehensible. In the material world, we work to enrich and improve it through tzedakah, responsible taxation, thus increasing neks, property. In the emotional world, investments in Gemilut Hasadim, acts of kindness, manifest in good deeds toward others. What is the difference between Gemilut Hasadim and tzedakah? Tzedakah relates to justice, and without it, what we earn contains an element of theft. Gemilut Hasadim, acts of compassion, mercy, charity, reflect our concern for the well-being of others, our love for neighbors, and our understanding that we are all equal before God. Gemilut Hasadim opens the doors to the emotional world and leads to the accumulation of treasures available to us whenever we need them. In the spiritual world, Birya, we invest in Kedoshim Tehyu, holiness. In the biblical sense, this means that we should all strive to become priests, as stated in the book of Leviticus 723. Brotherhood in kindness is better than wealth. Deepak Chopra, a world-renowned leader in mind-body medicine, based on the ancient Indian tradition of Ayurveda, calls the law of giving one of the fundamental laws of the universe and urges that every time we deal with someone, we should give something. It doesn't have to be something material, it could be flowers, a compliment, or a prayer. The point is that the functioning of the universe is governed by the dynamics of exchange. Giving and receiving are different aspects of the flow of energy in the universe. Since our body and mind are in constant dynamic exchange with the universe, stopping this energy flow would be like stopping blood circulation. That's why, for wealth and abundance to be present in our lives, we need to not only receive but also give. 724. This is also discussed, though somewhat more practically, by Joe Vitale, an American entrepreneur and author of famous self-help books. The main principle is, the more you give, the more you receive. What you sow is what you reap. This is all well and good, but I believe the reason for the misunderstanding of this secret can be established by simply analyzing the outcome of the law of giving. Intentions and motivations are more important than anything else. This means you should only give when you feel joy in doing so. If you're giving because you're expecting to make a profit, you're stripping away the ultimate goal. Deceiving the universe isn't easy. Don't waste your time giving in hopes of earning interest on your investment. The Lord isn't a share in the stock capital you trade on the Nasdaq 725. Ancient wisdom says, "Do good and throw it into the river." This saying is based on the Hindu teaching of karma retribution for good and bad deeds, which comes to us not when we plan it, but when cosmic circumstances align. By doing good deeds, we improve our personal karma, increasing the chances that not only will there be more good in the world, but also that the world will give more good to us personally. The purpose of creativity is selflessness. Boris Pasternak. But open your hand wide to him and lend him whatever he needs. Deuteronomy 15:8. European culture, however, produced a more instrumentally rational justification for altruistic good deeds. One of the 7 famous ancient Greek sages, Pittacus, asserted, "Half is more than the whole." And he had every reason for this, as he drew upon his life experience. Pittacus was held in great esteem by the Mytileneans, and they entrusted him with power. He held it for 10 years, after bringing order to the state, he laid down his authority and lived for another 10 years. The Mytileneans gave him a plot of land, but he dedicated it to the gods. That land is still called Pittacus's land. Socrates says that Pittacus kept only a small portion for himself. This example shows that through good deeds, we improve not some abstract cosmos, but our own, immediate living world. One should give without regret, not tearing it from the heart, but easily, as if gifting oneself, seeing it as a reserve we create for our future. The answer to why it is so important for a person to learn to give lies in the biological nature of living beings. During the brief period of biological life allotted by nature, animals, like plants, strive to achieve their natural goals: survival and reproduction. These fundamental processes are inherent to all living organisms. At first glance, we encounter selfish motivation here, but these goals carry a deeper meaning, which lies in the desire to leave something behind. Life does not arise just to exist. Life gives birth to new life. The true wealth possessed by all living creatures, unlike inanimate nature, is genes. Passed down from generation to generation, giving rise to new life, it is genes that make living beings truly immortal. Thus, the ultimate purpose of biological life is not to receive but to give. Unlike humans, animals lack consciousness. Nevertheless, many species possess the ability to create material objects for the better survival of their offspring, for example, birds that build nests to lay eggs and raise chicks. Many animals give not only a part of their genetic information but also their strength, energy, and even their lives for others. In this way, they fulfill their true biological calling to achieve the fundamental goals of reproduction and survival for themselves and their offspring. As for humans, due to their developed brain and intelligence, they strive to expand this list of goals and justify their existence with something more elegant and significant. However, this carries the risk of abandoning the fulfillment of fundamental biological goals. Most likely, this is why humans are mortal, as the decision to refuse these goals could very well be real. The realization that we are all mortal compels people to dedicate their energy not only for the benefit of their descendants but also for all humanity. You, who lived before me. My armor and blood kin. From Alieri to Schiaparelli. Thank you, you burned brightly. Wrote poet Arseny Tarkovsky, accepting the undying creative fire of his predecessors as a gift. In the biblical book of Acts, which tells of the first Christian community, the Apostle Paul conveys words of Christ that are not found in the Gospels. It is more blessed to give than to receive, Acts 20:35. When food is given to the starving, or warm clothing to one trembling from the cold, doesn't he feel happy at that moment? But the Lord assures us that at the same time, the giver is more blessed. Where can one find this blessedness, happiness? In a God-loving and compassionate heart. What does this blessedness consist of? In the feeling of doing and having done good, in the testimony of conscience, in the fulfillment of God's will within us, and in the joy of having brought joy to our neighbor. From a Christian perspective, it is natural to rejoice in giving because, through this, a person nurtures their precious soul. And this is the wealth that, according to the Gospel, neither moth nor rust destroys, and thieves do not break in and steal. Matthew 6:19-23, this is what we will take with us beyond the threshold of death. As Basil the Great, 4th century, said, at the Last Judgment, where the Lord calls the righteous to himself, the generous take the first place. And the unsociable and stingy will be thrown into the fire ahead of other sinners. Give to others, and you gain for yourself. As John Cassian the Roman, ca. 364-35, a notable theologian and theorist of monastic life, wrote, "The one who gives for God's sake thereby honors him and lends to him, a debt that will be repaid, if not in this life, then in the life to come, and will receive a reward for it as for a merit." The generosity of the giver is more blessed than the meagerness of the receiver, especially that generosity which comes not from money saved in unbelief or hopelessness, in divine providence, and not from treasures hidden out of greed, but comes from the fruit of one's own labor and pious sweat. The idea of divine recompense, divine reward, runs like a red thread through Islam as well. What is with you will run out, but what is with Allah will remain. And we will surely reward those who were patient according to the best of what they used to do. Whoever does good, whether male or female, and is a believer, we will surely give them a good life, and we will reward them according to the best of what they used to do. Quran 16:98-99. In the Islamic faith, what we give to others, that is, donate or sacrifice, is, in essence, a form of charity. According to Sharia, there are two main types of charity, obligatory and voluntary. The first, zakat, is an obligatory annual tax for the benefit of the poor and needy. The second, sadaqah, is voluntary charity given by Muslims to the needy paupers, orphans, students, travelers. Sadaqah can be given in material form, such as money, food, clothing, and other items, or in non-material form, when a Muslim donates their time, strength, or labor. Moreover, sadaqah includes a Muslim's voluntary renunciation of something in favor of another believer for the sake of pleasing Allah. This is the most valuable form of charity, when a believer gives not from excess but from what they themselves value and cherish. In this case, they show such a degree of love for another person, and in reality, for the Almighty, that it surpasses their love for themselves. Moreover, by giving away their own cherished things, a person fights their attachment to material possessions, freeing themselves from dependence. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. John 12:24. To those who sacrifice their property and show mercy to others, Allah promises a reward in this and the next world. The more a Muslim gives, the more they receive in return. When one gives good, good returns to them. The most well-known names of Allah in Islam are the most merciful and the most compassionate. When a person shows mercy and compassion to their fellow human beings, they manifest the best qualities of Allah. In Judaism, giving tzedakah, charity, is one of the 613 commandments that Jews are required to observe. If your brother becomes poor and falls into decline with you, then support him, whether a stranger or a sojourner, so that he may live with you, says the Torah. The word tzedakah comes from the Hebrew tzedek, justice. Sharing with the needy is, from the perspective of Judaism, an act of restoring justice, that is, an obligation. By giving tzedakah, a person becomes a mediator between God and the needy. The story of Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, demonstrates the renunciation of all conceivable earthly pleasures for the sake of personal resistance to evil and the suffering of people. Renunciation, the rejection of wealth and power in search of truth and resistance to evil, forms the essence of the fifth of the so-called 12 labors of Buddha. According to legend, influenced by the sight of a sick old beggar in a funeral procession, the prince reflected on the reason for the inevitability of suffering that accompanies humans and repeats through the cycle of rebirths. To find the answer, he renounced wealth and power, left the palace and family, and became a poor hermit. After becoming the Buddha, literally, the Enlightened One, and founding a new ethical and religious teaching, the former prince left behind a legacy unmatched by any royal descendant in history. A fire does not extinguish when it lights another flame. Lucian of Samosata. In their pursuit of worldly glory, ambitious individuals of all ages and nations have littered their path with countless misdeeds, bloody wars, and destruction. The great military leaders, who entered history through wars of conquest, left behind not only their fame as strategists but also thousands of ruined lives. Herostratus left a burned temple, and the tyrants of recent times left monuments to themselves, erected in their lifetime. But these monuments, like the glory of their creators, are fleeting. What remains in the memory of people is only what you have given. From the remarkable Russian artist Ivan Konstantinovich Ivazovsky, not only his paintings remain, but also his native city of Feodosia, which he improved through his efforts. Deeply in love with Feodosia and its people, Ivazovsky spent nearly all his resources on public needs. So that his fellow citizens could appreciate the benefits of scientific and technological progress, Ivazovsky brought a railway to the city. And not only did he do so, but he laid the tracks in such a way that the trains passing by could be admired even by those resting on the seashore. Sincerely distressed by the shortage of drinking water, a true disaster for the fast-growing city, he installed a water supply system from his own estate to the city. Being no longer able, he wrote in a letter to the local authorities, to remain a witness to the terrible plight the city's inhabitants experience year after year due to the lack of water, I gift to the city, in perpetuity, 50,000 buckets of clean water daily. This was Ivazovsky in his entirety. He participated in the construction of the seaport, founded a museum of antiquities in the city, where he collected artifacts of ancient art, and uncovered relics from Scythian burial mounds. Give, and it will be given to you. Luke 6:38. When giving, expect no gratitude. This principle was one the great artist and exemplary citizen followed throughout his life. After him remained not only the legacy of an unsurpassed marine painter. Feodosia itself remained, along with the art gallery he bequeathed to the city, a lasting and eternal monument to Ivazovsky the philanthropist. Earlier, we gave an example of a scientific and biological explanation for the phenomenon of a person's desire to give themselves, their energy, and their efforts not only to their loved ones but also to strangers and even to all of humanity. Psychological science is no less committed than biology to understanding the mechanisms through which the idea of gifting and helping others functions in society. How does this principle work from a psychological point of view? Let's start with the phenomenon of giving. Published in the journal Science, the results of a study by psychologist Liz Dunn and her colleagues demonstrate that happiness increases when a person spends more on others than on themselves. In studies involving around 600 participants, it was found that spending money on others brought people more pleasure than spending it on themselves. This surprising reaction was recorded among people of all income levels. In other words, even those with very little money felt joy when they spent part of their modest budget on others. MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, scans show, for example, that donating money to charity activates those parts of the brain that usually respond to pleasure and reward. Interestingly, the idea that processual behavior makes a person happier has been around since ancient Greece, when Aristotle said that the meaning of life is to achieve a state of happiness, eudaimonia. According to Aristotle, eudaimonia is the state into which a person enters by expressing their morality and virtue. Thus, it is not surprising that volunteering, for example, as an undoubtedly high moral activity, increases life satisfaction. It was found that the more frequently a person participates in volunteer projects, the more satisfied they are with life. In a 1998 experiment, a group of elderly volunteers was asked to give massages to infants 3 times a week for 3 weeks. Their health and mental state were measured before and after the experiment. The result was astonishing. The elderly volunteers became much less anxious, less prone to depression, their physical health improved, and their stress hormone levels decreased. Good deeds live for 200 years. Whether we can give much or very little, whether we offer material gifts or things that cannot be measured in monetary terms, the act of giving itself brings pleasure and a sense of happiness. Of course, human life is infinitely more complex than what simplified scientific experiments can capture. Sometimes, in order to achieve and preserve the greatest and most complete form of happiness, a person has to sacrifice their life. This is the theme of one Albanian folk tale. A dervish who once saved a young boy from illness promised to return for his wedding. The dervish kept his promise, but said to the groom, "I have not come to feast at the wedding, but to take your soul. This is God's command." The young man was deeply saddened and asked, "Would it not be a great sin to take someone's life at such a joyful moment?" Then the dervish replied, "I can do one more good deed for you. Go to your parents and ask if either of them is willing to die in your place. If one of them agrees, you will be saved." But the parents refused. "Then offer your wife to die for you," said the dervish. At that moment, the young wife, as per ancient wedding custom, stood silently in the corner. She had heard the entire conversation, and when her husband asked her, "Are you willing to die for me?" she silently placed her hand on her forehead, which signified her consent. To this, the dervish said, "Your wife was destined to live for another 44 years. Now you will receive half of her life, and she will keep the other half. In 22 years, you will die on the same day and hour. Trees are known by their fruit, and people by their deeds." After this, the dervish departed. Exactly 22 years later, the husband and wife died on the same day, at the same hour and minute. They were buried next to each other, and a beautiful rosebush grew on their graves, with crimson roses of wondrous fragrance. Everyone who saw these red roses thought of the husband and wife, of their love and fidelity to each other. What will remain of us is what we have given.